What is the worst experience you have ever had with your neighbor? S. When I first moved in my house I didn't know my exact property line yet. So I put wood by a tree I thought was mine. Neighbor came over saying it was his tree. So I went ahead and got a survey to settle any troubles. He was pissed when I got 10 feet beyond the tree. Problem solved though. She intentionally backed into my wife's car because she claimed my wife was parked in her spot. That spot was on a public street in front of our house. The cops saw it differently than she did. Lived above a guy in a really old fourplex and I guess the wood floors squeaked really loudly when I walked around. It's not like I was stomping around either, but the dude would constantly come upstairs and bang on my door and yell at me to stop moving around. I felt badly for him in the beginning because he seemed genuinely frustrated, but he didn't seem to understand or believe that I wasn't slamming my feet on my floor, his ceiling. I called my landlord several times asking him if he had a solution. I couldn't move because I was locked into my lease, but my landlord was just like, buy a lot of rugs. It got to the point that I couldn't take the constant yelling and I was literally either tiptoeing around or hopping from my couch to my chair in order to get out of my living room so that he wouldn't be standing at my door yelling at me. Finally I went downstairs one day and asked if we could talk about the situation because I felt like maybe if I looked him in the eye when he was calm and explained that I wasn't doing it on purpose and that there was literally nothing more I could do, I had already bought areas rugs FFS, he would maybe understand. So I went downstairs and very nicely explained and he seemed to be listening. And then he said, I'm about at the point that if it happens again I'm going to show up at your door with a really big knife, and then he just stared at me. I basically ran out of there. Called my landlord and said that I was more or less being threatened, and a month later the guy moved out. And then as soon as I could I did too. Super itty situation. When I was around 10 years old, my neighbor would occasionally watch me open my mailbox to see if my GameStop magazine had arrived. She would threaten me each time saying she was calling the cops and that it was illegal for me to check my parents' mail. I actually believed this until I was 15 years old. Lived on the top floor of a drug house in college because it was the only place that would let 7 of us rent together. The first week we were there the SWAT team did a raid on one of the units. There were 3 below us. They busted in the door and used flashbang grenades on them. One of the other units smelled like urine and constantly had people coming in and out buying drugs. Our keys barely fit in the lock because people had tried to pick them so much. Our cable internet stopped working, so we called the cable company to come check it. The guy took us over to the box outside and showed us 9 different illegal lines that were ripping our internet. I could go on and on. On the plus side, we could shoot bottle rockets in our hallway because it wasn't like anyone was going to call the cops on us. My neighbors and my family were absolutely fine for about 7 years. It's a nice old man that was recently remarried. They have a 20-year-old student that parties from time to time, which is fine. But then one day out of nowhere we find our 1-year-old cat dead in their garden. Obviously we cannot be mad. The cat probably died of a heart attack or something. So my family shrugs it off as a coincidence. Fast forward 2 months, we have a new cat. Younger. Cuter. I come home one day and my cat come crawling to me giving the loudest meow of his life. Turns out my cat was shot. Shot. With a bullet. Our gardener told us that he clearly saw the neighbor with a gun, shooting pigeons or something, minutes before my cat was shot. So yeah. As you can imagine, we haven't been close to our neighbor since that day. PS, our cat survived with surgery. Perfectly fine. But only has 8 lives left. Edit, yes, I agree with everyone. We should have taken him to court. But we had no physical proof other than the word of a gardener. And it was over a year ago. When I was just 14. So yeah. I am upset that we didn't take it to the authorities. We were trying to sell our house and the neighbor's meth head nephew was sabotaging it. When we'd leave so people could come look at it, he would sneak around just being creepy. Which turned off a lot of buyers. He even went into my house during an open house and was telling people not to buy it. These people lived like 100 yards away and we still don't know what his deal was. Once he started threatening my sister who tried to help him after he passed out on my driveway. She's a nurse. We called the cops and he signed a paper that said if he was caught on the property again he'd be sent to jail. Luckily we were able to sell it after that. I was in the process of selling my townhome. So I abandoned my house for a while and moved to another home. Dude took down the fence separating our townhomes and cut down my lemon tree. I was livid. Some 15 years ago when my parents and I lived in Fort Wayne, Indiana, we ended up befriending one of the neighbors and her 2 kids. Well, one day, we're all hanging out together and I notice her son had some pretty bad bruises and a nice size knot on his head. I kinda shrugged it off and we continued playing. Well, that night the mother comes over and confesses to my mom she killed the boy. She ended up drowning him in the bathtub after beating him severely. She wasn't remorseful at all. When she left back to her house my mom called the cops immediately and she was arrested shortly after. She vowed that when she got out she'd kill my mom. We noped the duck out of Indiana and moved to another state. Edit. Grammatical errors. I once had a neighbor in college that would knock on my door and ask for money. I would just say I'm a broke student and I can't spare anything. It was weird as duck and a weekly occurrence at the least. She was in her 50s and working. One day I got fed up when she knocked on my door. I think I was stressed for exams, and I said yay I got some money for you. I asked her to hold out her hands and gave her maybe $2 worth of nickels that I had in a change jar. She never bothered me again. Retired woman on my street follows the garbage truck and moves the garbage cans off the street while the rest of us are at work, because they are an eyesore. This would be fine except she would leave them in the middle of the driveway and there is no stopping on our street during rush hour bus route, so you either need to park a block away to move the garbage can then go get the car or risk getting a ticket while you move it. Since the houses are quite close together we found out the first time by turning in and hitting the garbage can because it was just far enough back that you couldn't see it until you turned. Moved into a brand new house. Noticed an old toilet, garbage and a broken down hot tub in the neighbor's front yard. Okay. Made cookies for all the neighbors and went over to introduce ourselves. He laughed and slammed the door in our faces. Okay. Out landscaping our new yard with my husband and laying some bricks. Husband is on his knees making sure they are level while I stand and hand him the bricks. Neighbor walks by and yells well. I can't see who wears the pants. Husband and I look at each other perplexed. Okay. Get a puppy. Our other neighbor lets us know she witnessed the neighbor's grown son throwing lit cigarettes over the fence at our puppy when he was in the backyard. We found about 50 cigarette butts in our yard. We do not smoke. Then she also had to call the police because his other son broke the lights on her garage and defecated on her welcome mat, all captured by her home video system. About 6 months later get a complaint for dog barking with a $500 fine. It was ridiculous. Our dog never barked. Unless someone walked by or came to the door. We had letters from all 16 surrounding neighbors attesting that our dog never barked. What great neighbors we were and how crazy the complainant was. The letters were not admissible. Since there were 2 pathological adult sons and the neighbor's word against ours 2 sane working adults. We lost and had to pay. We sold the house and moved shortly afterward. In the middle of the night strange noises would come from their apartment, like an owl mating with a German shepherd. In another, if I breathed too heavily, they'd come up and ask me to be quieter. I once told them that I was literally sitting on the couch reading a book and had no idea what noise they thought they were hearing. Another burned something in his oven. Rather than open his windows to get the smoke out, he opened his door to the hall and set off the whole building alarms. We had to all stand out in the cold and wait for the fire department while he watched from his apartment. The fire department opened his windows and told him he was an idiot. We still had to wait outside for them to do mandatory checks of everything to make sure it really was just him being stupid. It was January. In New England. During a cold snap. Came home to an smoke-filled apartment. Called the fire dept. When we couldn't find the cause. Turns out our downstairs neighbors put a charcoal grill on their stove so they could BBQ indoors. My only relief was a friend had walked my dog earlier that day so I know he wasn't in a smoke-filled apt all afternoon. TLDR, buy a carbon monoxide detector. I was 13 at the time. He tried to steal my dog and her puppies. He tried to enter our house, and when my mom and I stopped him, he told us he could break our necks whenever he wanted. Quite a nice guy. We obviously called the cops after that. They insisted that we pay to have a gate installed between our backyard fences so that they may use our above ground pool as they please. Preferably when they invite friends over. When we denied, they threw a hissy fit and found an excuse to punish us. You see, the pool was going through some expensive issues with leakage into the yard. They threatened to call the fine happy hour because the water was barely leaking into their yard they rarely used, and their dog was getting sick drinking the water. It wasn't. Not wanting to deal with that bullet and also wanting to clean our own backyard of the pond that begun housing frogs. My father spent his birthday day off from work in the Texas heat digging a trench and installing a pipe so that the water could drain. The neighbors came outside and harassed Dad the entire time he was digging the trench, telling him it would have just been easier to install the gate. Would have been easier to install a shovel into your frontal lobe. Ducking profligates. My parents' neighbor hurled abuse at the paramedics who had turned up to save my dad's life after he had a heart attack in the bathroom. All because one of the tires was on his front lawn's grass. Edit, I went to bed and this blew up. My dad is fine now, this is his second heart attack. It's going to take more than that to get rid of him. Serious though, this was a year ago and they have since got some new neighbors. They had a terrible relationship. The girl would tell him about her infidelities and then laugh in his face. The guy would then yell about the different ways he was going to kill her. Then they would duck. Florida, not even once.